Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Lisa DeFrank-Cole online. Lisa, how are you?
Hi, Michael. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. And I spoke in West Virginia a couple of years ago at a workplace wellness conference. And it was the first time that I'd actually spent more than a few minutes driving through that amazing state. And it was like, oh my goodness, this is just beautiful. And it's like the trees were so green. It's like my brain was having difficulty calculating how green and nourished they were. So beautiful part of the world for sure. So why don't you share a little bit about you and then we'll dive into this conversation.
Well, thanks. First, a note about West Virginia. It's a great place to go nature bathing or just being outside and actually soaking in all of that green as you're talking about. It's fabulous. So I am a college professor at West Virginia University. It's our state's flagship land grant institution located in Morgantown, West Virginia. So kind of the northern part of the state, just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I grew up in this region. I'm a daughter of Appalachia, and my grandparents were immigrants to the United States. And I am a first generation low income college graduate from Pennsylvania. So it's important to me to give back to this area, to this region that has given so much to me and to my family. And I love talking about the good things that Appalachia can provide, such as nature bathing and the natural beauty. But I'm particularly interested in women and leadership and how can we get more women into the senior-most leadership positions. So that's my passion.
It's an important passion to have, and it's critical. And we talked about this in the pre-show a bit about when I entered the workforce when I was 16. My managers and the managers and even one of the co-owners of the grocery store was female. And I didn't think anything of it other than, okay, they happen to be female and they're running the organization. Okay, great. I didn't understand the challenges that female leaders have faced and unfortunately continue to face as we approach 2025. And, my great grandmother and my grandmother and my mother all worked and had, leadership roles. And again, I grew up in an environment where there was, nothing was out of there. But then, when I remember having a conversation with my mom when I got home from work and was learning about some things, and she kind of explained from her perspective, some of the challenges that were faced. And I'm like, well, why? It's kind of naive. I'm like, why? It doesn't make any sense. And even fast forward today, still doesn't make sense. But it's the reality. So fighting for getting equal access to the boardrooms and to leadership roles are really, really important because not only from just a gender specific thing, but experiences. And I think that's one of the things that, is so important to me is you want different perspectives. You want different leadership styles. You want different ways to look at things because the world needs that. We need a different vision for certain things and experiences and all that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes attributed to Marian Wright Edelman, head of the Children's Defense Fund, was, "You can't be what you can't see." And so to you, it seemed natural and ordinary to have women in leadership positions. But to most Americans, and I would argue and say most people across the globe, we don't see women in the senior-most leadership positions. So women earn about 60% of all college degrees at this point and have been earning more bachelor's degrees since the 1980s, more master's and doctoral degrees in the past 15 years or so. Yes, there are some fields specifically where there aren't as many women as men, such as surgery, architecture, for example. But in the main, it's not a pipeline issue. It's not that women aren't qualified or capable, they don't have the right credentials. Yeah, I hear that a lot. People will say, well, is it just that, we didn't need to wait for it to come? over time, once they get enough experiences and education through that pipeline, they'll now be ready to take on leadership roles. But I think it's the World Economic Forum has predicted it'll be over 200 years if we keep playing that waiting game. So, just to give you some numbers, right? About 28% of Congress in the United States is comprised of women. 10% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women, and only about a third of college and university presidents are women.
Yeah, and you look at the density and the population and the makeup of it, it's way out of alignment and has been for a very long time. And what's frustrating too is, I think of, and again, I'm from Detroit, so the big three automakers, and Mary Barra has been running General Motors for several years. She has navigated that organization through, I think, more volatile times than normal, if you want to call anything normal in that sector. But from the pandemic to supply chain issues to safety recalls to changing the culture at a company that was about as rigid and stuck as you could get. And my dad and grandfather and great-grandfather all worked for General Motors. So I commenting on this from a personal standpoint. Do not use this as stock investment advice or anything like that. But GM was number one for a very long time, even the size of the organization, Fortune 500. But they weren't agile. They didn't change anything. They did things their way, and that was that. And everybody had to adapt to them, and it caught up with them. And time and time again, it caught up with them. And someone like Mary, who grew up there, because her parents were involved, and the experiences she had, she brought so much to the table, and is a poster child for why it's so important to give access to leaders like her, because she's been able to navigate through things that a lot of the predecessors that ran that organization, would never have been able to. And I don't think she gets enough credit for it.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, she's done a great job. And, we've known since the 1960s, research that was done way back more than 50 years ago, that diverse teams, heterogeneous teams, are more creative and can solve problems better than homogeneous ones, those that are comprised of people who are more similar to each other. So that diversity in thought and lived experience adds to the bottom line. So it's not just more creative, but we find that when we have women on board seats and in the C-suite of companies, they tend to be more profitable. So it's not just a nice idea to have equity. There's actually a business case for it.
I think back to, I ran a multi-site medical clinic several years ago, and the last clinic that I ran, we had representation from 16 different countries. Needless to say, the potluck lunches were off the charts. It was like, and it was frustrating too, because finally we got to the point where it's like, we can't have everybody bring it, because what happened was there's just so much food and you can't eat it all. You want to try it, but you are so just bloody full of food that like, okay, I want to try that, but I'm not going to be able to enjoy it. So we had to scale it back a bit. But it happened organically, because we created an environment where it was open and welcome for people from different races and parts of the world and genders to come together. And it was amazing what we could do. And that community that we served had a lot of those individuals, in the community. So what that meant from a healthcare standpoint was, if you're a patient, let's say you're from Nigeria, and you have a nurse practitioner or a doctor that is originally from that region, there's that natural, they get me, understand me kind of thing.
Yes.
And even if they speak in their native language, it improved access to care. That means there wasn't that broken communication, because they may not know English as well. I mean, I'm born and raised English. I don't know English very well either, but I did find out that my sixth grade teacher is still alive, which I found just on a whim. And she was hard on my English, so I should probably go back and thank her and tell her it didn't make any difference, but thank you anyway. But long story short, when you have different viewpoints and different ideas and experiences, it creates additional for an organization. It makes it better. There's new opportunities, there's new ways to do things, and it expands your reach. And we are a global organization. We're a global planet. And as time goes on, all of those barriers that we used to see are fading away. We're going to be doing business in Africa a lot more than we did before. All over parts of the world, there's been an equalization with using technology to give access to people to do things and grow. And that's one of those things where I'm optimistic about what it's going to be. But, case in point, that quote you had about the World Economic Forum in 200 years, if we do things, it just reminds me of Einstein's accredited quote. It's like insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting a different result. And that's like, well, we just, no, you can't, you literally, and we've seen it. We've seen the state of California legislate that a certain percentage of boards need to be represented by female and different races. And it's like, for one, I'm happy that they've put that in play. Part of me, though, is sad that we didn't do it on our own without government involvement. We had to go to the parents to get it forced in, and it's a shame that us as a species and as an existence have to lean on rules and regulations to do the right thing instead of just doing the right thing in the first place.
I think it's that way in a lot of sectors and a lot of industries, right? To do the right thing. Sometimes we have to be forced into it. But once we are, and I'll use that idea of a woman holding a leadership position, or if she's elected, it's much easier for her to be reelected. The idea that people see what she's done, what she's produced, they can't argue with the results. So once given a chance, women do succeed. It's not that they don't have the capacity or the capability. They absolutely do and bring valuable results.
So what are some things that organizations, from your perspective, can do to, tear down those silos and create opportunities? I think a lot of it is just, trusting the people and getting to know them. And I find when I did that, when I was leading teams, once I got to know the people and know what motivated them, what excited them, what scared them, but they were going to be good at it anyway, and you kind of give them that gentle, you're going to be able to get through this. We're here to support you. Don't worry. You have a safety net. We're not going to let you fall. But just creating an environment where people can feel safe to be able to be bold and do the things they need to do. What are some things that organizations, from your perspective, should be doing to create environments like that?
Michael, I think you raise a good point, because you're saying environment, and I think organizational culture, right? It takes the organizational culture to espouse that freedom to speak up. And some places have it and others don't. So how can organizations create a more egalitarian or collective organizational culture, one that fosters collaboration rather than competition? We find that generally speaking, women enjoy collaborating and achieving group goals together rather than pitting every person against each other to achieve an individual sales goal. So how can a team achieve a goal rather than the individuals achieve the goal as sales, just as an example? And we use this in contrast to a masculine organizational culture, which is what we've seen, right, perennially, not because it was set up to alienate women, but just because traditionally in the United States, the majority of paid labor and leadership positions were held by men. So kind of this competition between and among people was kind of the norm. But then in the late 60s, early 70s, as more women entered higher education and they wanted to get into the workforce, we just kind of pushed women into these masculine organizational cultural systems. And what we're finding out is it's not as fun to work in those places. So what you're describing is being open to those ideas and fostering relationships. And, I'll note you said something about potlucks. What a great way to kind of bring people together where it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or masculine or feminine. Everybody eats, right? And everyone cooks, and culturally people have their traditions and traditional foods. That's a very collaborative kind of experience, as opposed to saying, let's all go to the bar after work or to a golf game. So even thinking about the types of activities that an organization wants to implement to build that community matters. If a woman needs to go home, as most women are the caregivers of children and elderly in their families, they can't navigate the drinks after work or the 3 or 4 hour golf game on the weekend. So what can we do, as you're saying, like during the workday, to foster that connection with people? And cooking was a great way to do that. So
Yeah, you reminded me of something that I made a note on another notepad that I don't have in this room, but thank you for saying that because it reminded me of something. And this was during the pandemic. We saw articles and news stories about a lot of female executives making the choice to take a step back and, stay more at home to raise their kids, because the pandemic did a lot of things to a lot of people, not just the actual virus itself that, killed millions of people, but just all the surroundings around it with the lockdowns and the remote work and changes of things. And one of the things that really bothered me when I saw that was it wasn't as much of oh, this is a step back for the movement. For me, it was more of they shouldn't have to make that choice in the first place.
right.
And it's a reinvention of work. And you just mentioned the bar situation where the female can't because they have to pick up their kids or do this or do that. Couple things, and I know many homes are split, and over half the population divorced. So I get it, but in those types of situations, this is where creativity comes into play and say, okay, guess what? We're going to go out for this is going to be not an officially sanctioned bar night out for the workers, but somewhat. And you just basically say, okay, we're going to pool resources together, maybe out of a social committee fund or something like that, and we're going to hire babysitters or a daycare or something like that to watch the kids so you can go out and have a couple beverages with your coworkers, and then they don't have to worry about it, and they can just be in a non-work siloed environment and get to know people a little bit better. I mean, that's just a singular idea for things. Be creative, because and we're seeing this now with obviously the younger generations as well, is they look at the way work is and they're not happy about it. They're like, nah,
Right, right.
that's not working for me. And
Mm-hmm.
as a Gen X person, I tell every millennial aged or Gen Z aged or even the Gen Alphas, it's like, look, you have a cheerleader with me. I want you to reinvent work because it's not working for us anymore. It may never have. We need to, and don't get me on the Henry Ford soapbox of retiring the way that we've worked, because the assembly line work, transferred over to the office work. I'm like, that's not the same thing. But long story short, I want work to be reinvented. It shouldn't have to be a choice of this or that. It should be give people the opportunity to create and do great work, but also be able to harmonize that with their life and nuances of life as time goes on. So my hope is that the generations will be able to adapt and get things to a much better place so it's more open and equitable for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that equanimity or finding balance, and people poo-poo the idea of balance. What is balance? But I think you speak specifically to caregiving and childcare needs, whether it was during the pandemic or even what work organizations can do today. Paid childcare is an enormous benefit and help to women in keeping them in the workplace. Everybody's concerned about their children, but we see women, as you said, stopping out of the workforce to care for kids more than men. And there are reasons for that. generally, we talked about the pay gap earlier, I think maybe before the show started, but there's a pay gap. And so when we're trying to decide which parent should stay in the workforce and which should help watch the kids or take time off, we often see the negative cycle perpetuating that women will stop out because they already earned less than their counterpart, than their partner did. So that's only perpetuating. So then how long are you out of the workforce? And then are you seen as not reliable? Will you get hired back at the same rates? You're missing raises. And so yeah, it speaks to the absolute need of childcare in this country. And what happened when it was taken away during the pandemic, it fell on the shoulders of women.
Yeah, it was so many things, caused a whole lot of havoc, and a lot of people, took stock and, revisited, what work was for them. And so many people, it just doesn't fit. That's why we saw so many people looking for the remote work or launching their own stuff, or the gig economy. It's like, you know what, I'll work and deliver food or ride share or something like that. That way I can set my own hours. And there's nothing wrong with that. That those are great roles and obviously needed because we use the heck out of it, at least based on the emails I get. I know I've used it from time to time. I feel sorry for the car rental companies because I rarely rent a car when I travel anymore. I'm just like, no, I'm just going to just take a ride share and be good to go. But at the end of the day, we want people to have opportunities and to choose what's right for them. And they shouldn't have to choose because of necessity per se. They should be able to choose because it just makes the most sense for them, but it still allows them to do the things they want to do from a career standpoint and also, raising a family. It should not be an either or. It should be both because our kids are our future. They're the ones that are going to determine, what retirement home they're going to put us in. Hopefully, I know some parents are really worried because they're having some, buyers. Well, I want to say buyer's remorse. They're remorseful on how they did things when they were raising their kids, and they're worried that their kids are going to not necessarily put them in the best place. It's like, well, you better invest better then because you'll be bankrolling it. So it's not kind of on you. It's like if you want to be in a good place, start, maybe scale back on those lattes and start, banking that money because we live longer than we have in history. So think about plan accordingly. But it's, again, my hope is that in time, we'll continue to make work more accessible and equitable so people can really thrive and shine. Because as a society, when people are operating in their ideal creative space, we get better products and services. We all benefit from that.
Absolutely. Better products and services. People working to their passion. Yeah, they're going to do better at it. They want to do it. Yeah.
Great. So, Lisa, I love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and the amazing work you're doing?
Well, thanks. DeFrank-Cole.com, all run together. And as I said, I'm a professor at West Virginia University. They can find me there or on my personal website. But usually for speaking engagements, it's through my personal website.
Awesome. I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So, Lisa, thank you for being such a strong advocate for everybody, not just women, but, people. You have the best, intention and want people to thrive. And
that's right.
It's people like you that make this world better. So thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks,
it's Michael. Are you enjoying this episode? Have you ever thought about creating an episode or hosting a podcast? What are you waiting for? You can get started today with a new company. Stop. You can get started right away with podup.com, PODUP.com. I wish podup.com existed when I launched my show back in 2017. It would have made my life a whole lot easier in launching this show. But here we are. And now, thankfully, PodUp exists to help you. PodUp is one of the sponsors of the Breakfast Leadership Show, and someday they want to sponsor your show. Starting as easy as creating an account at podup.com. They literally have everything you need to run a full professional show. PodUp has over 35 different tools with AI integration, and AI integration is a game changer, people. It's amazing what some of these tools are doing for podcasts. So definitely something you want to check out. So if you want to set up a free starter account or get a full paid account, I have a 15% off code for you to use. It's Breakfast Leadership 15, and you can use that code when you go to podup.com. So check out podup.com, or if you want a podcast that's done for you, where you pay an agency to do all the website, social media, and editing work, you don't have time to do all of that, you just want to record and send it and have somebody make it sound good, then you want to check out podallies.com. So podallies.com. They're an agency run by the folks that build up the PodUp software right up from the beginning. So just go visit podallies.com and they'll make your show shine. So, and you can also get a 15% off for signing up there or with PodUp. Just make sure to use the discount code Breakfast Leadership 15. Can't wait to create with you and have you launch your podcast. Now let's get back to the show.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.